I got an email from Bethan asking about KCO and DLCO, TLCO, and some confusion. I've promised her I'll make a video this afternoon. It's exams shortly, so I've come in looking like some Starsky and Hutch figure, head to toe in denim. This is how it is. I'm going to start talking about KCO and TLCO. The starting point is TLCO is an English term. DLCO is what's used in American textbooks. It's pretty much the same thing. I like to think of this as the total amount of carbon monoxide that can be absorbed in a breath. And why do we do this? Well, how bad your airway is, so how fast you can get air in and out of your lungs, that can change when your lung has been damaged with smoking. But your lung can also be damaged different ways, and your lungs can be damaged for the pure absorption capacity. So although air can make it in and out of your lungs, maybe your lungs can't absorb gases. And the way that we measure how well your lung can absorb gases is with TLCO. So what we do is we take essentially like a bag of carbon monoxide. So we take a bin bag, put some carbon monoxide in it. I take a deep breath of that carbon monoxide, and then I breathe out into a different bag. And what I then do is a sum, and the mechanics that I do is work out how much carbon monoxide did I breathe in, and then how much of that carbon monoxide did I breathe back out again. So good healthy lungs, when I breathe in carbon monoxide, it should absorb most of that carbon monoxide, and then when I breathe out, very little of that carbon monoxide comes out. And that shows that my lungs are pretty good at absorbing gases. If my lungs can absorb carbon monoxide well, then it should be able to absorb oxygen well. And therefore, if I can absorb oxygen well, I should be able to release carbon dioxide okay. So how well my lung absorbs carbon monoxide is a surrogate marker of about how well my lung can absorb oxygen. So the types of things that make your TLCO high are things like if I've got, so what makes a TLCO go up? If I have a very strong heart, so if I've got increased cardiac output, then my TLCO increases. If I've got polycythemia, so if I've got more red blood cells going through my blood vessels, then my TLCO will go up. Actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a little diagram to make this whole thing a little bit easier. This is my heart. This is my blood vessel coming past it, and then sitting next to it is my alveoli. So gas is going at this stage in and out of my alveoli, and then that gas is passing through into this blood vessel. So as you can see, if my cardiac output goes up, so more blood is going down here, then it will be able to carry away more gas. If I have polycythemia, then I should be able to take away more gas. So that's pretty straightforward of what increases TLCO. I can also have some other things that increase TLCO. And these aren't just the normal day-to-day things. These are things that trick my test. And those are, what if I get blood in my alveoli, if I have a pulmonary hemorrhage? Those are through conditions, going back to the course, of Wegener's granulomatosis, Churg-Strauss, microscopic polyangiitis, and Goodpasture syndrome. We had better names for these, and those were GPA, eGPA, microscopic polyangiitis, and Goodpasture stays as Goodpasture. So when I've got blood in my alveoli, this tricks the test. If I now breathe in carbon monoxide, that carbon monoxide sticks to the blood in this alveoli. It sticks to it very avidly. And that vicious sticking together makes my TLCO go up and makes my lungs look as though they're working very, very well. They're not working well, but the carbon monoxide is sticking to these. So as well as increased cardiac output, polycythemia. I can also have alveolar hemorrhage. And in asthma, I have tiny little blood vessels all around my airways. In asthma, those become inflamed. Those blood vessels open up a little bit. And because they sit so closely to these tiny airways, we can end up getting some of this carbon monoxide absorbed into these inflamed airways. So we can write a list of increased cardiac output. We can also have polycythemia. We can have pulmonary hemorrhage. And we can also have acute asthma. So those are all of the things that are going to make my TLCO go up. I mean, there's other more minor ones, but this is just for the understanding. I'd like to put this here. What about things that make your TLCO go down? I can draw the same diagram again of my airway. Anything that's going to stand in the way of gas that comes into my alveoli and making its way across, and how it's picked up into this blood and how well the blood is being pumped around, is going to cause a decrease in my TLCO. Or DLCO, it's the same thing. DLCO is American, TLCO is English. So if I had pneumonia, I had pus sitting in my alveoli, then gas is going to find it difficult to make it through this diffusion surface into my blood. If I've got pulmonary edema in here, I've got frothy water, that's also going to make it difficult for blood to make it out of this alveoli into this blood vessel. Pulmonary edema also fills up the space in between. So just like edema in your leg makes your leg all puffy, edema within your lung tissue in the interstitial space then provides a greater distance for gas to pass from the alveoli into this blood vessel. The same way, I could also have pulmonary fibrosis that had fibrotic tissue that stops the movement of gas from your alveoli into this blood vessel. I could have a blood clot, a pulmonary embolus. I could have anemia, less blood traveling through here, and I could also have decreased cardiac output. All of these would slow the movement of gas from my alveoli through into my blood vessel and then be taken away. So that slows it. So decreased TLCO, let's move it from here. We started with pulmonary edema, pneumonia. We had some fluid in here, which was still pulmonary edema, but also fibrosis, fibrotic lung disease. Then we had PE, anemia, and decreased cardiac output. All of those decreased TLCO, also called DLCO. And I think most people have got the idea of that, but at least that gives you a little bit of physiological understanding of how that's working. I think the point becomes, what is KCO all about? What is KCO? If I've got TLCO and I've got things on those lists, what's this about? KCO is corrected for lung volume. So what I mean by that is if I was a small person, let's ignore predicted TLCOs, but if I was a small person and my lungs were small and my heart was small and everything was smaller, the amount of carbon monoxide I'm going to absorb is going to be very different than somebody who's a giant, who's really enormous. They've got a bigger heart, they've got bigger lungs, they've got bigger everything. So it seems a little bit unfair that somebody who is little gets a low TLCO, and because they get a low TLCO, we then say that they've got a disease. They've got one of these diseases that we've talked about over here. No, they're actually just small. So some people have smaller lung volumes than others. Some diseases cause smaller lung volumes. So what we should really be doing is we should have a value that's corrected for lung volume. And so, for example, if I had, so the easiest way to start off with is most of the things that give you a decreased TLCO will give you a decreased KCO. That even if I'm smaller and I correct for lung volume, if I have a disease, even once I've corrected for lung volume, I will end up with a low KCO. What is interesting is that there are a number of diseases that give me a decreased TLCO, but an increased KCO. And that's what I'm going to talk about now. This is the thing that I think is probably confusing you. So let's say I have a pneumonectomy. I take out an entire lung. So let's say I start out and I'm just going to make up a random number. I've got a 5-litre lung volume. I now remove one of my lungs and I now have a 2.5-litre lung volume. My TLCO in my pneumonectomy, my TLCO will go down because I have less lung tissue to absorb that gas. But my KCO will do a correction and say how much of gas is being absorbed in the 2.5 litres of your remaining lung volume. And I'm going to put two people side by side. I'm going to have a normal sized person. So me, I've got 2.5 litres because I've had a pneumonectomy. I've had a lung removed. And I'm going to take somebody who's quite small, somebody who's half the size of me. And they just have 2.5 litres because of lung volume, because they are small. Will both of us have the same KCO? I have a normal lung. The small person has a normal lung. We both have the same amount of lung volume. So will we absorb the same amount of carbon monoxide? And the answer is no. I will have an increased amount of carbon monoxide when corrected for this lung volume. And the reason being is because I am big with a big heart. And my big heart has got a high cardiac output. That's higher than this person who's small. This person is small will have a normal KCO because their lungs are proportionate to their heart. So, although this small person, will have a decreased TLCO compared to a normal sized person, their TLCO will be decreased, their KCO will be normal. With somebody who's had a pneumonectomy, their TLCO goes down, but their KCO actually goes up, because although I've removed one lung, the amount of cardiac output for that one lung is proportionately very high. We can do the same game again with the next person, which is, let's say I put a belt around my chest and I tighten up that belt very tight. So now I can only take little breaths. I can make little breaths. The amount of breath size that I've got is small. I could say the amount of breath size is the same as this small person standing next to me. So my TLCO will be reduced because I'm taking small breaths. The little person will have a low TLCO as well. But when I now compare KCO, the little person at the bottom here, he has a normal KCO because normal size heart for his small lungs. Whereas for me, again, although I'm taking this little breath, this tiny breath, I've still got a big person size heart with a big person size cardiac output. So although I'm taking little breaths, I will absorb a lot more of the carbon monoxide than the person with smaller size lungs with a small breath. So my KCO will be up. The point that's interesting when you take this away is if I have somebody, so I'm taking a person, somebody, and I either remove half a lung, or I limit the size breath. When I do either of these, I end up with a pattern of decreased TLCO, but an increased KCO. When I say limit breath, I could have let's say, a musculoskeletal problem. So I could have ankylosing spondylitis, and I'm all hunched over, and that is squeezing my lung tight, and I can only take little breaths. Maybe I've got a neuromuscular problem. So I've got Guillain-Barré syndrome, and with ascending neuropathy making my respiratory muscles weak, or botulism poisoning with a descending neuropathy making my respiratory muscles work. And at that stage, my forced vital capacity is very small and I'm taking little breaths. In that case, I'm limiting the size of the breath that this person is taking, but I will end up with a decreased TLCO and an increased KLCO. So any neuromuscular problem or skeletal problem where I limit the size of my breath that I'm taking, I will end up with this specific pattern. If I am just a small person, I will have a decreased TLCO compared to a big person, but a normal KCO. If I've got a horrible disease like a pneumonia or pulmonary edema, my TLCO will go down and my KCO will go down. They will both go down. So I end up with these three patterns: low TLCO and low KCO. Those are all of the diseases that I spoke about back here. I can have a low TLCO with a normal KCO, and this is usually found in somebody who is constitutionally small. This is size is small. And what we have done is we've done percent predicted, which kind of makes this a little bit easier, so we don't make it look as though they've got a low. Or you've got somebody with a low TLCO but an increased KCO, and it's one of these issues, that I've had a pneumonectomy or I'm limiting the size of the breath that I'm doing. All of this builds towards either picking things off a list of decreasing TLCO, decreasing KCO, and to one specific question, which is, if I have ankh-spond, in ankylosing spondylitis, I can have a skeletal problem making me hunched with small breaths, in which case, if I've got a pure skeletal problem limiting the size of my breath, my TLCO will be reduced and my KCO will be increased. If I've got ankylosing spondylitis, I could have an okay skeleton, and my skeleton is fine, but it can actually give me lung fibrosis. So ankh-spond can give me lung fibrosis. So if I've got lung fibrosis, I end up with decreased TLCO and decreased KCO. So all of this is pointing towards, if you see somebody with ankylosing spondylitis, or somebody that can give you both a problem with how my chest expands or problem with fibrosis in my lungs, how do you work out where the problem is? Is the problem predominantly taking a breath size problem, or is the problem a lung fibrosis, a more fibrotic type problem? You can do that with looking at TLCO and KCO. And the nice thing is when you think back to the course at the weekend, we did talk about this a little bit. And one of the conditions that we talked about, where I said it messes you up badly on the inside, no matter how badly it affects your skin, was systemic sclerosis. Any connective tissue disorder can give you lung fibrosis. But diffuse cutaneous systemic sclerosis gave you very tight skin around the proximal limbs and the chest and abdomen. And it could also give you lung fibrosis. So in diffuse cutaneous systemic sclerosis, where I've got lots of fibrosis of the skin, and I'm ending up feeling very breathless, what test, as a bonus, through everything that we've discussed so far, would allow you to tell whether this is a skin problem, giving you chest wall tightening, or whether this was lung fibrosis, giving you breathlessness? What combinations of tests would you do, and what would your findings be? in order to be able to work out what the problem was. Best of luck, Bethan. Take care.